Well, ho, 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 and hello, my friends. Welcome back to Bible Eyes, a show where I read the Bible and talk about how silly it is that people could get away with thinking that this thing is true all the way through. Today, we're going to be talking about a biblical contradiction or a historical issue within the Bible that holds a very special place in my heart. This is probably one of the first really serious issues that I came across in the Bible as I was coming out of religion, and boy, this one hits pretty hard in my opinion. So we'll see how you guys like it. It is the Christmas season, and as such, I think I'm actually going to be doing a whole series of videos on the Christmas stories in the Bible because it's a deep well of content. There is a lot of inconsistencies in the Christmas story, which makes sense because it was made up, and it was the Christmas story as we have it today, in my opinion, is very obvious hero worship mythology that was put down into the Bible as a sort of propaganda technique. It's the same kind of technique that the emperors and god kings of the ancient Near East would have participated in. Someone like a Caesar would have also had like these stories about, oh wow, they were a young person and they were so remarkable, and their birth was foretold in the stars, because that was how people consolidated power at that time, and they told these mythologies to legitimize their own stories. In reality, it obviously makes basically no sense that the entire Christmas story is recorded, because who the fuck would have been there? I mean, I ostensibly, I think Jesus' mother Mary stuck around with the rest of the gang. So I guess you could argue that Mary was there and kind of retold the story. But I'll be honest with you, given that Mary became mysteriously pregnant when she was supposed to be a virgin, I think we have some amount of reason to believe that maybe Mary's word is not entirely reliable, maybe, but that's a different story for a different time. Today, what we're actually going to be talking about is a lot of the Herodian dynasty line. So I want to give you the quick version of the contradiction, and then we're going to actually really get into it, because I want to make sure that we're not leaving any room at the end of this video for some believer to come along and be like, well, maybe it was just, if you really think about it, actually it was the Herod Archelaus was the tetrarch of, we're going to get into all that, and we're going to just beat it to death. So let's do it. Matthew chapter 2. This is the beginning of the Christmas story, actually before this particular section comes right before it starts talking about the Magi, the wise men who came from the far east and followed the star to come give gifts to Jesus or whatever. It says right here, in the time of King Herod. The question that I actually am going to be asking at the end of this is a little spoiler alert. The question that is really central to all of this is, when was Jesus born? Now, keep in mind, this is the most important event that has ever happened in human history in the Christian worldview, second maybe only to Good Friday and the resurrection. So we can really make sure we get this right, because this is pretty important. The fate of billions of souls for eternity hinges on making sure that we have the right details so that we can make an appropriate judgment about whether or not this person who is claiming to be the Messiah has any legitimate claim to that. So again, the question is, when was Jesus born? So right here, in the time of King Herod. This is going to be so easy, you guys. Because first of all, I mean, we've built our entire calendar system around this, right? 0 AD is going to be like everybody's gut check reaction to this question. When was Jesus born? But the thing that gets really weird about this is actually it says, in the time of King Herod. Now, there's a bunch of Herods in the Bible. We're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about several of them. But the short version is that Herod, King Herod, that we're talking about here, it is referring to Herod the Great. I'm gonna prove that point later. Herod the Great was the king of Judea At this time, it was a client kingdom of Rome, and he reigned from 37 to 4 BCE. This is the consensus view among scholars. There is older scholarship. This Filmer study comes from 1966. I haven't gone actually to the source material, so I don't know where they're making this argument that it goes all the way to 1 BCE, but it doesn't matter because either way, he died before 0 AD, right? And his reign ends in 4 BCE because he dies, okay? And the Bible tells us that, and that's how we know it's true. So I'm going to go ahead and put Herod the Great here in a reign that this is my little timeline calendar, and it's actually goes off the edge here. So 4 BCE is when Herod the Great reigned. Luke chapter 1 agrees that the Christmas story also happens during the reign of Herod the Great. I think that's down here someplace. Here, we'll just do it this way here. Okay. Oh yes. In the right here in the days of King Herod of Judea. Now, it's not actually talking about the Christmas story here. What it's talking about is Zechariah and Elizabeth getting their prophecy and getting pregnant. It says that happens during the reign of King Herod. But then it also says that in the 6th month of that pregnancy, Mary comes to visit her cousin Elizabeth. Mary at that time has already came on by the Holy Spirit. So she is pregnant already with Jesus. The baby leaps in Elizabeth's stomach at being in the presence of the Lord or whatever, right? So this is all happening still within the reign of King Herod. Or at most, I guess it's possible that like Herod could be like dying at this time, and then like, Mary's pregnant during Herod's death, which would be another biblical contradiction. But at most, we're within 9 months of Herod the Great's reign. The problem comes in Luke chapter 2. It says, in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. Now that's a false claim, but that's not really important. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was the governor of Syria. Now, Quirinius was the governor of Syria beginning in 6 AD. He was appointed as the legate governor of Syria in 6 AD. And at that time, he was ordered to take a census, and this is called the census of Quirinius. So it was taken in 6 AD during the reign of Quirinius. Quirinius, by the way, took over for another tetrarch from the Herodian line. So there's this. The issue is there's zero overlap between Quirinius and anybody whose name is Herod, and that it's about 10 years, right? So we're all the way over here with Quirinius, and then the census itself was like taken right at the beginning of his reign. So right here is where the census of Quirinius is. So the short version of this whole contradiction is there is no way that anything could have happened. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the birth of Jesus or Mary getting pregnant, or none of this could have happened during a time period where Herod the Great was king and Quirinius was governor of Syria. There was more than 10 years of time that elapsed between those two things. So that it's a pretty open and shut case. I almost feel like I'm stalling a little bit because there's just not that much to say about why that is so obviously wrong. The Bible is just clearly incorrect, at least about the timeline of when Jesus was born. Now, when I got into this, I was like, now I want to really make sure, because there are like several Herods. So you've got Herod the Great. He has quite a lot of sons, actually, that it literally just gave up on saying like predecessors or successors. It's just like, this is his issue. So Antipater too, and Alexander, and there's a whole bunch of them. And Herod was kind of psycho, and he's like killing basically anybody that was a threat to his throne. So he would kill his own sons and stuff for like kind of no reason. So he was kind of wild. After Herod's death, his son Herod Archelaus took over. And Herod Archelaus was not his like first son. This was not like your typical succession line, but Herod Archelaus is who took over. And the reason I want to bring this up is because for a long time, like if you don't look too closely at the details, I think it's really easy for your like knee-jerk apologetic for this contradiction to be essentially that like, well, maybe like there's just a little confusion about like, you know, there's obviously more than one Herod that was in charge, so obviously like they could all be king. So maybe it's not quite as bad of a contradiction as we think it is, because maybe it's like Herod Archelaus was the one who was like in charge. Or maybe his other son, Herod Antipas, who is like shows up a whole bunch later on in the Bible. Herod Antipas is the one who married Herodias, and then John the Baptist didn't care for that very much, and so Herod Antipas was the one who ordered John the Baptist to be murdered. So you know you got all these Herod characters kind of all the way through, and it's like if you're just a regular Christian who's just going to church, you're just hearing this word Herod, and you're like, no, you know. It's very natural for us to think like there's probably just something that we're missing. So we're going to go all the way through it. Herod Archelaus, the son of Herod the Great, he reigned from 4 BC to 6 AD. You can get all the way in. There's really interesting like political maneuverings all through this whole time, beginning with the Maccabean revolt in the like 2nd century BCE, and then the Herodian dynasty took over from another family dynasty that had power in the area. But during this time, the territories that they control are like growing and shrinking, and they're getting taken over by the Romans and fighting for their freedom, and then freed by the Romans from the Hasmoneans, and like it's a whole thing. There's all this stuff going on, so it's a little bit hard to keep track of. Herod Archelaus was actually like, I think the important thing to know about him is he wasn't a king. He succeeded his father to the throne, but Herod Archelaus's official title was that he was the ethnarch, which is essentially a governor position. It's not the same thing as a king, and no one who knows anything about the history of this region would ever refer to this person as King Herod. King Herod refers to Herod the Great. And then when Herod Archelaus was removed from power in 6 AD, Quirinius took over as governor of Syria. And that was, again, in 6 AD. So all of that's to say that I guess I should have come in here and done this, basically. All that's to say is there is no way to harmonize the dates in the Bible for Christmas with what we know to be true about the history of this region, not only from Josephus, but also from the Bible itself. We know for sure that King Herod is not referring to Archelaus, because later on down in Matthew, when Herod dies, the angel of the Lord comes and it tells him that Archelaus was ruling in Judea. So the Bible is very, very clear that Herod the Great is the king that we're talking about. Archelaus' father is the king who died so that they could come back from Egypt. There's just no way around it. I don't know what to tell you. I think, guys, I've got my Starbucks cup here. I think we're going to win the war on Christmas. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, keep ignoring the stuff that's in this silly book, and please don't build your life on it. Have a great one.